So were you entertained tonight watching Thursday Night Football? Or maybe you were entertained because it was asinine yet again? That's kind of the theme of Thursday night games and kind of the theme of the Pittsburgh Steelers season this year. It was entertaining in a way, at least at the end, and maybe because it was asinine as well. And we'll get into all of that here. I'm Mike Asti, and I'm going to have a little bit of a conversation with some friends. Going to maybe do this after some games here, after some big games. So click the subscribe button on this channel. Not anything else I do, but just here right now. And then you get notifications whenever this keeps on happening, and we can have some fun. And you can maybe guess what I'm drinking here. And it is not just water, but maybe water with something else in it. And you can maybe join us and talk about what we just watched, because that was the Steelers beating the Tennessee Titans 20-16. And it was a lot to be desired, for sure. It was kind of a roller coaster ride, as it's been with the Steelers season. And I saw some people that have been the biggest Kenny Pickett defenders out on Pickett at halftime and now back on the Pickett train when you could argue, was he a reason to win this game, and chalk another one up for the defense. But that is James Santelli joining me on this reaction program here on my personal YouTube channel. So this is affiliated with nothing. This is just me to have some fun with some friends and colleagues and talk about what we just watched and whether or not we regret watching it, or whether or not we were entertained by watching it, or what the hell it was. So I guess, James, were you entertained? Were you able to find anything positive in that game outside of winning? Because Tennessee's kind of an average team as well. Like, the Steelers were supposed to win. They basically barely got over the spread. They did win. But, I guess I could argue that maybe Matt Canada standing on the sideline is allowing him to call some better plays, but they didn't really get to happen or work.
Well, first of all, let's point out I couldn't help but notice you bringing up my picture into frame just before you saying Kenny Pickett defenders. Some Kenny Pickett.
Well, I actually was not referring to you. I'm not planning on doing this and just chucking people under the bus that are not here. But I was not actually referring to you. But we will get to that. Yes. Are you still defending Kenny Pickett with all your might?
Well, to your question, was it entertaining? That's for others to say. Was I entertained? Well, yeah, sure. Especially when you consider what we have all been through with these Thursday night games. Honestly, if you're grading on that curve of the Thursday night games on Amazon, this was one of the more
you should see who's next week. I looked at it already to see what I maybe will do after that one. Yeah, Panthers Bears. Yeah. This might be the premier matchup of the season. Panthers Bears, and maybe we have a West Virginia native that's going to be starting in that game if Justin Fields is still hurt. So maybe that's some intrigue there. But Panthers Bears.
Panthers Bears is kind of the platonic ideal of a Thursday night game now. It used to be Jaguars. Before the Jaguars got good, it was like seemingly Jacksonville was playing half of their games on Thursday and the other half in London. But yes, I mean, we had an entertaining ball game, and you know what? You could have plopped this onto a Sunday, and it really would have been similar to what we've seen from the Steelers this season. At least in most of the games that they've played, it has required going down to the wire. Nothing's easy. Sometimes the defense has to make multiple stops with under 4 or 5 minutes left to go. And yet again, we get another, technically, Kenny Pickett game-winning drive, although it came earlier in the fourth quarter, and it took a couple of times with George Pickens stepping out on the one drive that could have put them ahead for good. But it requires the defense making another stop there. I will point out, beyond us Amazon watchers, it was good value for the Steelers fans who were going to tonight's game, because you saw, well, maybe you didn't, but before the game and a couple of days before, on the secondary ticket market, it was looking like it's going to be a cold night in the 40s. There's the get-in price for the game was something around $40-$45 for some tickets, and you certainly got your money's worth if you were down at the stadium on the North Shore tonight, because you got much more football than you bargained for, with the Steelers giving it back, for one more drive for the Titans and ending up with the interception. So you know what? If nothing else, it was the best value for your money for any attending in-person Steelers fan so far this season. That's not nothing. I'll give that.
Yeah, I guess so. And just looking at what the Steelers offense has been doing, because I do feel like it was better in this game, at least trying to be better. Maybe Pickett was worse, and I guess I'll ask you if you're still in on Pickett here in a moment. But 26, 23, obviously 6, 17, 24, 10, 20. I mean, this is 2023, and those are the offensive outputs for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's unbelievable. Like, this is 2023. This is not 2003 when maybe that could work. So it is amazing that you have that as your offensive output, and yet you have a winning record, and you're very much in the thick of things. So Mike Tomlin doing it again, and this, I would say, was at least the third victory to credit the defense, with the earlier season game that was literally TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith single-handedly winning it. This, they get maybe an assist at the end, and the defense does. But yeah, man. And the entertainment could be on the field. It also could be what you watched in the box. It wasn't Taylor Swift, but it was JJ Watt, so a legend in himself. And he was enjoying some Sarah's candy, some Sarah's chocolate-covered pretzels that I'm certainly jealous that he was able to enjoy. But as I now see, good friend of ours, Alex Wiederspiel, will also jump aboard here. So, Alex, yeah, you're giving us the wave. How are you?
Yeah. What's up, guys?
Alex, good to see you.
You too, James. I hope I sound okay. I'm using an internal mic at the moment. I'm having all sorts of tech problems tonight.
I figured you would. Anytime we do anything, usually there's tech problems, whether it's professional or
I bring the college radio stank on everything.
I think it actually is just you, because we used to joke that it was the two of us together, and then it has continued to happen to you and not me that much, like the last 5 years.
Yeah,
outside of things with you, so it's always been you. I'm gonna
so I will say most of this.
But by the way, you do sound fine.
Okay, this is good. This is good. The internal mic is working, but I was like, this is really my fault. I was just working all day, and I just got home, and I forgot to bring home my headphones. So that's problem one. And problem two is I can't find my USB microphone, the connecting cord. My home office is a mess right now. It's getting better. But so I don't think anyone really needs the full details here. But what I'll basically say is that I'll take the blame. This one's on me.
I mean, it usually is. But
yeah, okay.
Yes. Just out of curiosity, Alex, then, before I go to James, who goes from staunch Pickett defender to see where he is now, as Mr. NFL draft expert, I'm imagining that maybe going into that draft, you were thinking, you're an outsider, you're obviously not a Steeler fan, but what are your thoughts on Kenny Pickett and the polarizing stench that is around him? Because he obviously gets drafted to the city that he played college ball in. There's tons of pressure there. But I think, James, we all can agree there certainly are some people that are willing to give him more than a benefit of the doubt because he's a Pitt guy. And I'll admit there's a lot of people that are rooting against him because, say, they're a Penn State or West Virginia fan that also share the rooting interest of the Steelers, like Alex has here, and does not want him to succeed because they're pissed that a Pitt guy is their quarterback, despite a Penn State alum being the tight end for the Steelers. And yet it feels like now collectively everyone's like, I don't know, like what's going on here. They're kind of all out. But for a complete outsider in that perspective, outside of the WVU connection, where were you and where are you now from what you've watched of Kenny Pickett?
Yeah, I mean, I think the flash.
You've seen some bad quarterback play over the years because you're a Jets fan.
Yeah, man. I mean, I would take most of what Kenny Pickett does over most of what I've seen for the last 11 years. Really, the last 14 years. It's been pretty rough. Outside of like Ryan Fitzpatrick in 2015, I mean, it's been.
Would you rather have Zach Wilson now than Kenny Pickett now? I guess
I would honestly. I mean, Pickett's pretty erratic with his accuracy, but Wilson's far more. He's one of the most erratic throwers I've ever seen. Honestly, and you don't even want to get me started on Zach Wilson right now.
I know you were out last year, and I know
I was out when they drafted him. I thought the motivation was all wrong. So And listen, I think there's like some similarities there. I think some of the motivation on drafting Kenny Pickett could theoretically have been wrong, but the thing is, like, the Steelers have built up a lot of credibility over the years as like one of the premier run franchises in the not just the NFL, but all of professional sports. So I actually give them a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt on a player like Kenny Pickett, and the decision to actually bring him in, and when they brought him in, is also critical. I looked at the Jets' decision to draft Wilson, and I saw like really, really not amazing motivation there. I saw two things. One, a franchise in constant turnover that was smoking a little hopium at the time.
They just killed Sam Darnold.
A new coach and GM combo who wanted their own guy, and they were under the impression that, with Darnold, if you bring him back at the time, you're paying him a little bit more money. You might be picking up his 5th-year option, or you're giving him a new contract that he had not earned at the time. So the thought is you bring in Wilson and you've got a cost-controlled player there. To me, I saw nothing but corrupt motivation. And corrupt's a strong word, but I did not see good motivation amongst the Jets organization. Now, you can draw a parallel with some of the reasons why the Steelers might have drafted Pickett, but I have a tendency to trust the Steelers organization a little bit more. And this is something that, as an outsider, I say this to any Steeler fans who happen to be watching this right now. I don't know that Steeler fans realize exactly what is happening in Pittsburgh and has happened over the last so many decades, purely because there hasn't been a Super Bowl win in however long that it's been now. Are we going on what? Since the Santonio
14?
Holmes?
Yeah, that's the last one, 100%.
Okay,
yeah.
So it's a solid amount of time.
They're in another one after that and lost to Green Bay.
And I get that's a long time for Steeler fans. I totally understand that. What I will say, though, is there is no sport on the planet, and there's no league on the planet where it is harder to do the simplest thing, that is actually win football games. And the Steelers will look bad and still win 8 or 9. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what's happening now. That's what I'm saying. It really wasn't entertaining. It didn't look good. It was a mess, and they won this game.
Mike, they're the literal, what is it, the meme from Breaking Bad? They can't keep getting away with this. That's the Steelers for the last few years. Because even when they don't look that good, they find ways to win. And I hate cliches like that, but football is one of the few sports where sometimes you really can toss out the analytics and you can toss out the numbers. And if you win enough individual matchups at the right time, and you have just enough of forcing the other team to make a mistake or two more, sometimes it works. And
although
I'm
James
a big
can
analytics guy, the Steelers defy analytics in a lot of ways.
I was going to say, James can tell you, though, there are a lot of Steeler fans out there that, well, not even secretly, they outwardly wish the Steelers would have, instead of crawling to 9-10 wins with these miraculous Steelering it up type of victories, they wanted the Steelers to have a 4-win season so they could actually be potentially better off to kind of rebuild this. And instead of just doing the 9-10 win thing, Tomlin never has a losing season, to actually eventually have like a 14+ win season and actually go for the damn thing. They crawl in or they just miss. And that appears like that's where we're headed again. Like they're going to either crawl in or just miss and lose right away. Like that's clearly inevitability of this season, unless something changes, or else we have the greatest defensive run of an individual player for TJ if he stays healthy.
So, and I have such weird mixed emotions about that. Like, I get it. And the 76ers really did popularize this, and now it's been beaten to death. You know, the New York
hasn't
Rangers,
really worked out for them either. But
right. Well, but so the Rangers followed suit with The Letter, which came out now 6-7 years. I think it's 6 years ago now or actually it might be 5. I think the 5-year anniversary was a couple months ago of The Letter. And that was very much in the same vein as what the 76ers, the Trust the Process. It was great.
Gotta feel like you're the only one keeping track of that anniversary.
Well, believe it or not, a lot of Ranger fans are well aware of that one. And the thing is, it's not just the Rangers who have done this, right? Like a lot of teams in the NHL have gone this route now. Some with differing degrees of success, right? And we've seen teams in the NFL do this. You know, you look at the Dolphins, right? And they're sort of the poster child of actually stripping it down and pulling this off.
Yeah.
You look at the Texans, you look at the Bears.
Yeah, and they change coaches repeatedly, and they
look
think
at
for
the
Tua,
Jets,
and that's worked, right? Yeah.
I got to tell you, like Steeler fans should be aware that like the strip down process, I'm not saying that was a scientific study I just did, but I just named 4 teams, right?
Yeah.
That have all very publicly done this, some of them multiple times. And the ones who have done it multiple times have failed multiple times. That's why they're doing it over and over again. The Bears,
or you could be as desperate as the Browns were, and they swung and missed on a drafted quarterback in Baker Mayfield. That relationship ended in divorce, and a really, really bad one. And then they basically get so desperate, they pay someone they felt like was a 10 on like a supermodel scale when maybe was really like a 6 with controversy, and they just give them 10 money, and it's all guaranteed, and it's just a mess, and they're worse off than if they probably would have stayed with the draft pick and kind of powered through that drama. So if you get really, really desperate, you get that. The Steelers never get that, but I mean, they're not going to quit on Pickett being a first-round pick for a year or so more, but yeah.
Well, let's face it, the tear down and complete rebuild does not work in the NFL nearly as well as it does in Major League Baseball, or in certain cases,
like we just saw in baseball at the Rangers, right?
Yeah. Right. Going from a 100-loss team, and same with the Diamondbacks, going from a 100-loss team to the World Series, you can pretty quickly replenish a farm system and compete. In the NBA, you can pretty quickly get a great lottery pick or two and sign a guy or two and turn it around. Can't really do that with a 53-man squad in the NFL. And really, what this comes back to on the Kenny Pickett side is really just a matter of timing. I mean, you can look at that 2022 NFL draft and say, well, who else was it going to be? Unless you were going to make a trade for somebody, which the Steelers seemed like they dipped their toes into the trade market and weren't willing to come out of it with,
Pickett was the only first-round QB taken by anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, or second round for that matter. Right. And even the guys that got sniffed around as possible, first-round picks, it was with Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, and Matt Corral.
And Will Levis is now quarterbacking as the savior of the franchise that drafted Malik Willis. So, that obviously didn't really work. So,
it's just not.
And that was the guy that a lot of Steelers fans wanted.
It hasn't been the franchise guys the last couple of years, and so
would you have been better off not? Like if you, I mean, it's hard to say in retrospect now because I know Mike Tomlin, even covering at the time, they were in love with Kenny Pickett, and there are some who've now argued, including some that maybe were so high on Pickett that have now dropped from being as high, that maybe the Steelers had rose-colored glasses because they watched Kenny Pickett every day at practice during a Heisman campaign, and that doesn't always in any way translate to the NFL. So say if he was at a different college and they weren't watching him every day, they might not have been as in love as they were with him, which is why they drafted him and nobody else did. His people thought he'd be taken earlier than 20. He fell in the eyes of the Pickett camp, and many experts, Mel Kiper and all those guys, thought 20 was late for him, and the Steelers were thrilled to have him then. But maybe there's a reason why everybody didn't jump at him, because they could have stole him in front of the Steelers. It wasn't like the Steelers had to fight for him. They're just sitting back, and they had him fall in the lap. So maybe that's possible, a retrospective thing. But the option would have either been you do it because he probably was the best first-round graded quarterback in that entire draft, and that's still proven to be the case in that particular draft, or you just don't go QB at all. Mm-hmm. But then you're already done with Ben. What do you do then? I mean, I guess maybe you have a Mitch Trubisky season. They had already signed him. That would have then been the Mitch or Mason season. But I guess the debate would then be you probably could have won the same amount of games with those two guys, and then you draft a QB in this class. And I know some Steelers fans are going to say, or if you really sucked, then you go try for Caleb Williams and to tank it, which is the only method in the NFL is if you could really be the worst and tank it for that, or do the Rams thing and F them picks and just have no picks for 10 years and buy a ring, which is what they did.
I'm not convinced that the Steelers, with the defense that they have, and Mike Tomlin running the show, I'm just not convinced they're ever going to be bad enough to get that top quarterback. But there are a couple of interesting 100%. Points that you guys have both brought up that I want to address. Let's start with Kenny Pickett and where the Steelers drafted him, because the reality is I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I'm too lazy to look them up at the moment.
You don't need to. But this is not a professional show. That's what
I know. But so the success rate of drafting quarterbacks, even in the first round, after you get past a certain point in that first round, is really low. So it is kind of you draft a quarterback. What was Pickett, 20?
He was 20. Yeah.
It's almost a scratch off lottery ticket at that point. It's a slightly higher odds scratch off lottery ticket, but it's kind of a scratch off at that point. The other thing worth noting here, and this goes back to something that both of you have said, and this is one of the things I love about the NFL. It's what initially made me fall in love with the NFL draft. And that has only become more true over the years.
And then you rooted for the Jets and fell out of love.
Well, yeah. Well, seriously, I don't have as much time to dedicate to the NFL draft the way I once did, like when I was in college. Once you have a job, you can't really do that in the same way.
Sure.
But here's the thing. The reason why I absolutely love the NFL draft, if you look at the other 3 drafts, right? Let me tell you some numbers on the NHL draft, okay, right? Outside of the first overall pick and in select years, the second and third overall pick, those guys aren't playing for at least a year, oftentimes up to 3 or 4 years.
And even Hall of Famers, it's years until they get on the squad. And
the vast majority of those guys, you know what the success rate, and this is the craziest thing about the NHL. I'm not even talking about becoming a good player. I'm actually just talking about becoming a rank and file NHLer.
Right.
Do you know what the success rate, like after the 22nd overall pick, is for a guy taken after 22? It's under 50% of just playing 100 NHL games. Not even being good, just playing 100 NHL games. So think about that, and then think about the 22nd overall pick in the NFL draft. If you go look back and look at the last 5, I bet there are at least reasonable.
Yeah, not even a season and a half.
Right, who are playing immediately as a rotational player, guys who might have started right away. And that's what makes the NFL draft so great, is you can go find starters in the 4th and 5th round. Is it uncommon? Of course. But you can find guys who can contribute across every single round. And that's why the idea of tearing it all down, it's absolutely a viable strategy, but you don't have to in the NFL. If you keep some of those draft picks, or if you're like the Rams and you scout very, very well in later rounds, but if you keep some of those draft picks, the overwhelming odds are you're going to get some contributors, because that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
You're drafting almost the majority of the time guys who are ready to play professional football. That's the
weirdest thing about now is, though, than when you were studying the NFL draft, just going off of this year and last year, a lot more teams, and maybe this is the Rams thing, and teams figured out, well, okay, they went F them picks, traded a bunch of picks. They brought in Matt Stafford to solidify a Hall of Fame resume. They brought in OBJ when they probably didn't really need him that year, and he contributed before getting hurt. Von Miller, that year, basically, literally, it was on T-shirts. F them picks. They're trading picks. They have none now. It's amazing they're even competitive in some games, and they probably should have beat the Steelers if referees knew what a first down was. And that methodology has continued to work these next couple of years, meaning teams are willing now, and we never saw this. Alex, our entire lifetime, MLB trade deadline is exciting. NHL trade deadline is exciting. NBA even now. Obviously, freaking every player wants out of every team, and they always get moving. It's exciting. Nothing ever happened in the NFL. It was like a joke they even had a trade deadline and even had shows to talk about it. The last couple of years, though, teams are saying F them picks at the deadline of the NFL season has already started, and are making trades. Not as much this year, but there were a lot of rumors about it. That never happened before. And I feel like there are teams sitting there saying, we're not going to fully build up from the draft. If we have a little bit and we're kind of like the Steelers thing, like if we're a Steelers team that maybe is regularly like a 9-8 type of thing, we will F them picks for 3 years down the road and trade for a major player in the middle of the season to get over a hump. The Steelers were in some rumors to do things like that, but no one ever believed they were going to. But there are franchises doing it. That happens now that never happened before.
By the way, really quickly there, it's so funny that Mike brings this up, because if you go back like a decade, I think it was 2000, it was either 11 or 12, like the biggest trade of the trade deadline of that offseason, or I'm sorry, of that trade deadline season, was the Seahawks trading Aaron Curry, who was like an overdrafted. He was like the 4th linebacker on a 3 linebacker base defense, right? So terribly overdrafted in the top 5, signed a big contract in the pre, back when the rookie scale was still completely messed up, and they traded him to Oakland for like a 7th round pick, and that was the deal of the day, man.
Yeah, and even having a deal was a big
deadline deal.
There would be years where there'd be no deals. There would be some years where no one would do any deal at all, even if it's minor. So to have that deal that you can even remember, it's amazing. But yeah, now we're getting actually major rumors in the middle of seasons. That never used to happen.
Well, and I'm glad you bring it up in the sense that this kind of speaks to what the Kenny Pickett in the NFL experience sort of requires out of Steelers fans, which is, and it's kind of a fool's errand, but patience in the way that NFL fans these days are not used to practicing patience.
Right. Not at all.
And
No.
I think part of that is there's almost
I mean, there's no patience in life anymore.
history.
I mean, but yes.
We don't have time to go into all that. But
Sure,
there's sort of a revisionist history about like who Kenny Pickett was at Pitt. That like if you weren't paying attention, it seemed like, oh, he was this wonderkin freshman that came in at that end of the season against Miami and led them to victory, and it was all it was going straight up from there on his way to NFL startup, and that was absolutely not the case. No,
there were Pitt fans that were out on him a couple years prior to the ACC title. 100%.
100%. He struggled a lot of times in the sophomore and junior season. There was every reason to believe that he was just sort of, kind of a caretaker quarterback, that he was benefiting from a strong running game, that he was benefiting from the system. And it wasn't until that senior season, and you can see it from the stat lines, that he truly made that step up. And even toward the end of it, like even earlier on in the season, it was like, maybe he's a mid-round draft pick. It wasn't until
it even
end.
goes to the coordinator thing about Canada right now that some bring up about play calling, because there are some Pitt fans that say that Mark Whipple is who jumped him, and obviously that ended when Pickett ended up leaving and going to the NFL. So it was almost out of nowhere. Like I wasn't predicting Pickett to have a Heisman campaign.
And that I say all that to say that part of what appealed to the Steelers about Kenny Pickett was his ability to work hard and be able to take the steps that were going to be required of him. They watched him do it in that practice facility on the South Side to step up from just a kind of, middling ACC quarterback to somebody who was Heisman worthy. But it didn't happen right away. It didn't happen, his sophomore, junior year. It took until year 4 for that to happen. And look, I'm not expecting Steelers fans to say, okay, well then we'll just twiddle our thumbs until we have, a true NFL.
They're not going to wait 4 or 5 years, right? You can't do it.
You hope to see more flashes of that from Kenny here in year 2 and next year into year 3, but it may not happen that way. And really, the overarching question for the Steelers and for the fans over the next year and a half or so is how much are you willing to budge and wait for that? And on the flip side, how much is the defense going to be continuing to paper over those issues and continue to bail them out and win ball games? It's worked out so far.
And who do you have around him then too? Because the whole debate on the running back position as well, like Pickett is not a guy ever that can do it alone. Like even in the Heisman campaign, Jordan Addison, he had the Blitnikoff winner. Like he had a great historic season, but he's always been somebody that to elevate needs guys around him more so than maybe him by himself elevating others, like say Brady did back in the day or whatever. So if Najee's no longer there after a year, because there's no way they're going to give him a mega deal, the running back position doesn't have a long shelf life. I argue they shouldn't even have drafted him because they had no O-line then, and you're only going to get 3-4 years out of him, and it's been up in the air, but he's going to be gone. So are you going to have an undrafted guy like Jaylen Warren where you're giving money to, or are you going to bring somebody else in new? So Pickett may lose continuity with his running back. Pickens will probably be there for a while, but like him and Deontay have been hot and cold. There's great moments, and then there's like this game for George Pickens. And maybe Matt Canada will be there. Maybe Matt Canada won't be there. Like he has never coached on the sidelines his whole life. It almost feels like Mike Tomlin's putting him there saying, we're the Rooneys, we're the Steelers. I'm basically not allowed to fire you. So what I'm going to do is have you stand next to me as if we're like in middle school here. And I'm like, giving you a weird punishment and making whatever play you call, you have to like look the guy in the eye and say, that's the play. So I don't think he's going to be fired mid-season, obviously, but like how long is he going to be there? And then to your point, James, and this is part of the Matt Canada thing, if you do at any point remove the offensive coordinator, which is now the only one that Pickett's had in the NFL after losing the guy he had in college, does Pickett take a step back because he's learning a new guy, a new coach, a new system, a new way of schooling? Like Pickett seems like once he figured it all out and how he was going to study, how he was going to get it done, that was great. But does he have to do it all over again? The way a lot of NFL quarterbacks have their careers go nowhere, even if they're talented, is they're in bad situations. They don't have continuity at coaching, and they don't have any consistency in how they're working and how they're literally doing the job. So Do you go back to square one if you fire Matt Canada, which all the fans want? But like that could affect Pickett. He can't overcome that yet. So that's the Pickett story right now. Like my problem with Pickett is this is only year 2. I get what James is saying that you normally need several years, and this isn't like Andrew Luck coming out that everyone thought he was immediately ready. Like Pickett, despite being a Heisman candidate, anyone who is of sound mind is probably thinking, well, he's not going to jump on the field and be an MVP candidate. You got to give it time. He got to learn the NFL like he had to learn college, and it took him 2 or 3 years to learn college. And I get a quarterback needing time and needing to be in a system and all of that. And I even get what Peyton Manning has brought up on his little non-professional, very professional on ESPN Manning cast during games, is saying that he wasn't good for 2 or 3 years. I mean, the guy's throwing picks left and right, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He flat out sucked for 2 or 3 years. There's other examples of this too, whether guys are sitting for 2 or 3 like Aaron Rodgers, or they just weren't good. Problem is, you're not going to get that time today. So like if Peyton Manning did what he did his first 3 years in 2022 to 2024, he would never have been able to be a Hall of Famer. Like he would have been out of the league and been a laughingstock all on Twitter. Or X. So
which is very funny, by the way.
Not going to get that rope is the problem.
By the way, Mike, that's very funny when you consider the financial differences that Manning would cost a lot less in 2022. Right. Remember, there was no rookie scale at that time. One quick note, I want to say, you guys have brought up a real chicken and the egg argument here. And the problem that I see is Kenny Pickett struggling because he's in Matt Canada's offense, or is Matt Canada's offense because he has Kenny Pickett struggling in it? Keep in mind here, so I watch majority New York Jets football. I think
tonight's game, Pickett struggled because Pickett struggled, to be 100% fair to Matt Canada. I don't think if they would have lost this, Matt Canada takes the L. I don't think the play calling was horrendous. He's had some really bad play calling games, but I don't think this particular game, and I don't even think last week, I think he's been slowly getting actually a little bit better, that you can point and say, well, he's holding Pickett back. It's not like I think Tennessee's play calling was bizarre, and they obviously have a rookie quarterback that might be scared in, but at the end of the game, it's like 3 straight runs, and then let me chuck it deep on 4th down. Like that was odd. That was making it harder on the QB. That was what Candy was doing weeks earlier, or it was like all runs and then maybe one pass, and it was bad. I don't think that's now the case. I think Pickett's just not showing you the progression that you would want to see, and seeing the whole field and feeling more comfortable out there and feeling more in control. Things you want to see from a guy who has 10 starts in or something like that, that it might be unfair because back in the day you get 3 or 4 years. But in this, we have seen teams give up on first-round picks in year 2 many times in the last 5+ years. So if the Steelers do it, and they won't, it wouldn't be outside of the norm right now. He's actually lucky he's on the Steelers. If he was playing this exact level of play, winning this exact many games on, say, the Washington Commanders, who's done it, they gave up on Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace, he probably wouldn't be lasting much longer. It would be like the beginning of next year, and that'd be it, probably.
Yeah. Well, I look at this and I see, so I think the last year's New York Jets team is actually a very good example here. Elite defense for one, that really did quite a bit of damage, and carried them to the point that people forget they were 6-3 and had a Pyrrhic victory in that 6th win where they lost both Breece Hall.
That's why they thought I'd bring in Aaron Rodgers and we're a championship team. That's why they got convinced of that.
No Elijah Vera Tucker, no Breece Hall, out for the season, and at that point, Zach Wilson's very much exposed. Ultimately, they go to Mike White, and the thing is, I think Mike White went 1-3 as a starter, but the offense moved a lot better with him as the starter.
That's not the narrative out there.
But in those games, there were a couple of moments that they were really tight football games, and they were the type of games where 1 or 2 things goes a slightly different direction. And we're one of their losses was to the Minnesota Vikings. Play came down to the last game of the season. We know the narrative on the Vikings now. They 11-0 in 1 possession games last season.
Yeah, and then this year, not at all.
Completely unsustainable from year to year. And of course, one of those was against the Jets last year, and instead, the Jets very easily could have been a couple wins better, especially if you add that one in there. My point, though, was that the offense ran significantly better, and I don't need a single analytic to tell me this. I watched the games, right? Mike White ran.
Yeah, I know you wanted him to stay, right?
Yeah, way better every single time. And there were a lot of Jet fans that I'd see on Twitter, now X, but back then Twitter, who were constantly they were like, why doesn't, and I think it's Matt LaFleur is the coach in Green Bay, right? So it was his brother, Mike LaFleur was the Jets offensive coordinator who ultimately was the scapegoat when I really feel like he didn't deserve what happened to him. But keep in mind, the question was always, well, why doesn't he call these types of game plans for Zach Wilson? And it's because he clearly didn't trust Zach Wilson.
It's about trust, 100%.
Mike White more than Zach Wilson. And that's the point that I ultimately come to, is that it's very difficult sometimes in this. It becomes a very chicken and the egg type of thing. And yet someone's going to get blamed. And ultimately my thought is it's likely going to be the coach, not the player.
Right. Especially when it's the first round QB, 100%.
Yeah. And one more thing, the reason why I think it's going to be the player, not the coach who survives this, is that I want you to think about two things that Kenny Pickett has done this season that have kind of shocked me. I don't know if they shocked you guys, but being on the outside of this conversation, he has been injured twice in a way where I thought to myself, oh, he's not playing next week. I remember seeing.
I didn't think he was going to play this game up until maybe yesterday.
Short rest on Thursday night game. I'm like, there's no way Kenny Pickett's playing this game. And Kenny Pickett played both those games. If you don't think the guys in the locker room don't recognize that, that's the thing.
I think that's the thing that James, I'm sure, can attest to. The thing about Kenny Pickett is, even from Pitt, certainly in that final year, he galvanizes the troops. Like he is Lord of galvanizing troops. He's like a Tim Tebow leader, but you got to have more than that in the NFL, obviously, because Tim Tebow might be the greatest galvanizer of troops of all time. There's a statue about him galvanizing troops. And then the NFL, he tried to do the same thing. He had speeches. Yeah. He was out there. He did win a playoff game over the Steelers. But then eventually the NFL said, yeah, I mean, you can be like our, public speaker, but like in terms of franchise QB, I don't think so any longer.
Teammates will run through the wall. But
right. And maybe there are some that'll live and die by him, but that Pickett has that special it factor that players do love playing for. I'm sure the players in their heart of hearts prefer playing for Pickett and his personality than Mason Rudolph or Mitch Trubisky. And I don't know, also part of, Alex, if maybe you could argue rushing Pickett into this game on a short week, if that wasn't part of Mitch Trubisky, who's supposed to be a security blanket as a veteran, a former first-round pick too, that I know Bears fans argue the Bears killed and he should have been better there and it wasn't his fault. He didn't look great when he came in for Pickett last week, and obviously they lost. So, like, if he would have looked better.
They were talking about Mason Rudolph because
there were people that wanted Mason Rudolph to start this game, which just would have been hysterical.
I've never understood the Mason Rudolph upset. That's, as someone who watched a lot of Big 12 football, like
some would love him and then some
very
hate
good
him.
College quarterback.
It's a whole different
never
conversation.
Thought he'd have NFL success.
He's a very handsome man.
He is a very, very handsome man. But yeah, like the Mason Rudolph, I mean, I think Mason Rudolph's good enough to be a backup quarterback in the NFL. There are some that think he should be out of the league. So it's a very polarizing conversation. But like, if Mitch Trubisky was better, you could argue that prior to last week, I think everyone would have thought Mitch Trubisky could put up like a 50% completion percentage and 150 some yards in a game that the defense wins. And like, that's what Pickett kind of did. And yet they won.
You guys have seen every snap that this guy has played as a Steeler, right? I'm so confused.
Most of them.
I am befuddled by Mitch Trubisky because I don't actually understand how he's not at least better in this role, because it seems like there should be something there. And I don't know what I'm missing between.
It wasn't the role he signed up for. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that I know for a fact he's upset that he's even in this situation, despite knowing the business. When he was signed, as we talked about, I don't. Number one, I truly believe the conspiracy theory that despite the Steelers loving Kenny Pickett, they did not think he would be available to them because they loved him, but they just kind of tried to trade for a player and they swung and missed there with Devin Bush. I don't think that they were thinking we're going to give up the farm for Pickett and go jump into the first 5 picks. So I think in their heart of hearts, they thought we're not going to get this guy. And then when he was there at 20, they couldn't avoid it. But if they thought they were getting Kenny Pickett 100% slam dunk, I don't know if they would have signed Mitch, because they already had the experience. They already had Mason still on the roster, no longer having, Duck, that Duck Hodges thing didn't work out. But like, Mason had already won 5 games for you. He's nothing special, but he can be a backup who can win a couple games here or there. Duck wasn't going to give you that, even though some loved him. But like, they signed a former first-round pick and paid him a decent amount to be a backup prior to drafting Kenny, that many around the Steelers thought they signed Mitch to be their starter that year in a bridge to whenever they drafted the first round guy the next year or thereafter. And then when Pickett was available, they couldn't avoid it. So they got themselves in this like weird inadvertent quarterback controversy, started the season with Mitch, and then they weren't winning. So then they went to Pickett, who's the first round guy. And once you do that, you can't go back. But I think the number one issue probably is that Mitch probably isn't really happy. He probably feels he was screwed with the Bears. The Steelers gave him a chance to be a bridge. They didn't even get to be the bridge because they end up having the first round guy from college fall in their lap. And he also dealt with a really bad offensive line. Like, I don't think Trubisky's proven that he's a Pro Bowler by any means. But in terms of situations that he's been put in as a first round pick to try to have success, and you always need a good situation to have success, I don't think he's ever been put in a situation that could lead to anything more than a career backup.
Yeah, it's funny you say that though, because this is the same thought I had with Sam Darnold when he left the Jets and he had that really good start with Carolina. I thought to myself, this makes total sense to me.
Yeah, they pulled the plug on him quickly too.
Right,
100%.
You know what? He started playing really poorly as the season went on, and this is just one of those things that I've always kind of wondered about. You know, it's really hard to find 32 quarterbacks, and ultimately someone has to be the worst quarterback, right? Like, and this happens every single year. Usually they wear green and white.
Well, Mr. Irrelevant went to the NFC title game last year.
Yeah, I know.
Brock Purdy. Yeah,
usually they wear green and white, though. And my point, though, is that I have found over the years, when you look at like the Ryan Tannehills of the world, I really do see a benefit towards being a little bit patient with these guys and saying, like, if they're at Geno Smith is another great example where I think more and more
no one's gonna have that kind of patience, but yes.
Where you say if you say I can wait, and I'm not talking about one team doing it, but I'm saying if you can wait 6 or 7 years, and basically what I'm saying is if you can be the team that can benefit from the other what other teams have done, and getting a guy coming in, once they've seen a little bit more, it does seem like the game slows down enough that you can start actually evaluating what this quarterback
even if
is.
They haven't played a lot. Like, I think Geno being a 10-year veteran, even though he hadn't played in like 8 years, he shows this year and last year as an experienced quarterback that's more mature, like he's seen it, done it, or at least he's watched other people do it. Like, I don't think he'd be doing this with a similar talent if this was 6-7 years ago. Like, he needed that period of chilling out and then becoming this veteran quarterback and, being one of the better quarterbacks in the league. So, yeah, I think that makes sense. But to also say, Alex, Pete Carroll, I know he sit there on podcasts and talk about he always saw this in Geno years ago, watching him. He felt this vibe of Geno. It made him comfortable to move on from Russell Wilson. Like, that's some bullshit. Like, there's no way you're going to convince me that he saw Geno Smith having one of the most efficient analytic seasons in NFL history last year prior to giving him the job. He gave him the job because he was okay and he was sick of Russell Wilson's bullshit and was like, we'll try this. And if it doesn't work, we at least got Russell Wilson out of here because, God, he's annoying. And then it turned into really working out with Geno Smith. But, like, no one saw this coming.
Yeah, I think, what do they call that? There's a found money is really
right.
He found a $50 bill in his pocket, basically. Right. A pants he hadn't worn in
put it
years.
Through the laundry. Right.
All that tells me is we need to let Kenny cook. But I want to say one thing.
We do.
I want to say one thing about the Steelers offense before I jump off and let you guys go. But, credit to the offense and to Matt Canada as a play caller, and that they did something tonight that they really hadn't done so far this season, which is go out first drive of the game and lead them down the field and take whatever it was, 8, 9, 10 minutes off the clock, and take it all the way down for a touchdown drive. And really, it was less about play calling tonight than it was about execution and the struggles to execute at times for Kenny and the Steelers offense. There were a lot of throws that Kenny skipped or threw over, didn't make.
He looked worse in this game.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, yes, until that fourth quarter. There's been a lot of talk around, like, well, why aren't you using Najee Harris in kind of the same way he was used so successfully in Alabama, which is as a pass catcher with space, given opportunities. He had a couple of those tonight, but then there was a critical pass that he let go off his fingertips when he would have had space and the ability to make room. And then there's George Pickens, not getting his second foot down in the end zone. So really, this, even though it's not going to appear that way in the box score, in the final score of how this offense looked, this was sort of a reprieve for Matt Canada in a way that it was less about him and anything he did wrong play calling wise. In fact, there was some success, especially early in that first drive of the game, and more about execution and the younger guys on this team needing to be a little bit more effective in those spots.
Yeah, and like as you just brought up, glaring mistakes that anyone watching the game could watch, and it seemed like even the most Matt Canada hater,
even me,
right? But like even the most, because there's a lot of them out there, but even the biggest Matt Canada hater that I normally see on social media, I saw a lot of comments of, well, I can't go Canada here on this game because I got a clear example of George Pickens can't get the foot in, or Najee dropping this ball. Like there are clear examples that nobody can deny. Like that, so, but you cannot say Matt Canada is to blame for George Pickens making a fundamental mistake. And this is why many have argued that these guys are really talented, Najee, George Pickens, etc. But maybe they're feeling their talent a little bit too much, feeling themselves a little bit too much. Like there's things that they're not fundamentally sound on. So yeah, that's the issue. And like they luckily won this game for the Steelers, but the worst thing that could happen to Kenny Pickett, James, I'll leave you with this if you have to go, is if they do fire Matt Canada, then like universally, and this would be the staunchest Kenny Pickett supporters to the Penn State WU fans that are rooting for the Steelers as well, that hate Kenny Pickett secretly, everyone would unify and there'd be no one else to blame or to argue. It would everyone be watching, seeing the game, looking at the numbers, seeing what happens unfold them, see the eyes, and if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. Like that the scapegoat would then be gone. He's able to cling to him, not in this game. But like, there's just not that step forward that you figure he should be taking at this point. But yeah, if Matt Canada is ever totally gone, first of all, the Steelers fans would end up hating the next offensive coordinator. Steelers fans never like the offensive coordinator. No matter who it is, they never like the offensive coordinator. I mean, they fired an offensive coordinator with Bell and AB there scoring 40 points and blamed him even when they lost the Jacksonville Jaguars in the playoffs because the defense allowed 30 plus. But that would be the scapegoat would then be gone, and then it would be all up to Pickett. And they won this game, but you can definitely watch this game and say, yeah, there's not only problems with Pickett, there's problems with other parts of the offense. And even when you fix the play calling, if the execution's not there, it doesn't matter. Like they won, but like it was because of the defense again, and they didn't beat a good team, and the team had a rookie quarterback. So, I mean, this isn't like, we're going to dump Gatorade here. I'm sure I'm not there, but I'm sure Mike Tomlin's out there saying, we won. There's a smash mouth football. I'm not going to apologize for winning games. This is what we got to do. It's the NFL, but like we got a lot to work on. Clearly.
Yeah, you get 9 days to sort it out, which is normally something you would say after a loss, not after a win.
Right.
But there you go, gentlemen. Very good to see you. Take care.
Yeah, great seeing you, man. Absolutely.
James.
Yeah, James Santelli. So Alex, I will let you close it out with, I want to ask you a question because obviously you're a Jets fan, and it's nothing to do with this particular game because we talked this to death. And I guess for the Tennessee angle is that the Titans are just always the Titans to me. Like before I actually get there, because I do want to ask you like your Jets feeling right now, and like Rodgers is like dealing with Wizards, and if he's going to come back, and like where your hope meter is, but. Do you slurp the Will Levis Kool-Aid? Because I will admit, I covered the combine. I was there. He was very arrogant. He was vocally like pissed that nobody was talking to him, and he yelled out like, "Come over to me. I'm going to be a star." Like he is annoyingly arrogant before doing anything, and it's kind of funny. Like Penn State gave up on him. He ends up at Kentucky, put numbers up there, but like, what do you know from Kentucky? Penn State actually wins more without him, even though obviously it looks like he's the better QB if we're comparing him to Sean Clifford in terms of pro potential. But nobody predicted this. I didn't predict he would be this. He had a great game against the Falcons, but it's the Falcons. He looked okay here. I think, honestly, the play calling was very conservative because they're worried that he's a rookie, but he kind of looked composed at the end. It did not look like the lights were like too bright for him, but it's hard for me to buy that Will Levis is going to be the guy for you for the next 10 years. And the Titans haven't really had that guy since Steve McNair. Mm-hmm. Do you slurp the Will Levis Kool-Aid here, as annoying as he is?
Yeah, let me answer that question by finishing with the Steelers really quickly, and then okay. I'll be able to circle
Steelers
back.
Comments. I didn't think you'd have that many Steeler comments.
Well, sure. Because there's just one thing I want to say here is that
they're a very talk show worthy team, by the way. They're easy to discuss.
The Steelers. I think Steelers fans, and again, I can't speak to all of them. I just know what I've seen occasionally on social media, and there's a lot of anxiety in every fan base. It's kind of it's part and parcel with being a sports fan. But the thing is, I would actually say right now, I understand why there might be a little bit of anxiety because I think Steeler fans, similar to Jet fans, but not with the same level of misery, are thinking, hey, we have maybe a championship caliber defense. I don't want to waste that on.
And TJ Watt, a legendary figure, going for sack records. It looks like that could be wasted. Right. 100%.
But here's the thing. They're 5-3. Okay. They are 5-3, and they're doing it while Pickett is working through this stuff. And I can't speak to the Matt Canada stuff. I understand the complaints. I really do. I think complaints about.
I think he's looked better in terms of the last couple weeks, though. I do actually think he's improved. But
I think the complaints about the offensive coordinator messing up the young quarterback are as old as the NFL.
Come on,
it's been going on forever. So what I'll say.
I guess the argument could be like, how did Matt Canada earn the job?
Right.
Failed at Maryland. Failed at Pitt, who you're in the facility, kind of like a failed college offensive coordinator, didn't show you anything in the NFL, and then you're going to bring him on while you're going to have a franchise quarterback and be moving on from a Hall of Famer to a rookie with pressure on him. It seemed like that wasn't the hire. Like maybe this wasn't putting Canada in a position to succeed either. Maybe you should have actually brought in a veteran OC, which is what jump-started Pickett at Pitt. When he had young offensive coordinators, it wasn't working out for him.
So on a macro level, I think Steeler fans just kind of need to suck it up because here's the thing. He has not played enough games yet. Sample size wise, guy hadn't played enough games yet.
Yeah,
gotta see more. I actually think some of the flashes have been encouraging. There are obviously things that need to be cleaned up that are concerning, but the team is 5-3 in difficult, very difficult AFC North. I totally get it. But when I look at this season, football is a game of get better each week. And I understand it's tough to take the macro view because we only have so many games and each game is so critically important. But I would just say you're 5-3 in a certain sense. You are 5-3 without having played your best football. So ask yourself this: if you give Kenny the chance to finish,
most teams are usually 3-5 when they don't play the best football.
Right. So they're 5-3 without playing their best football, without really having a super kind of a little bit of a pop gun offense. If Kenny Pickett improves, let's say by 15%, he gets 15% better,
where he was supposed to be this year. You figure that you would get to I think that's my issue. Being 100% fair is he has not physically shown with my eyes to be improving incrementally 5 to 10 to 15% from a year ago. Even just seeing the field and being more comfortable on the field, it arguably looks a little worse.
Right.
And yes, the team's winning more, but I think that's the concern and that's the freak out that you cannot win this way forever. You cannot win championships this way. This is not the 2000 Ravens. You're not going to be able to do it in the 2023 NFL. And if the quarterback is regressing in year 2, yes, you give him time year 3 and 4 when he's a first-round pick. But if he regresses in year 2, despite winning, what makes you believe he's going to get better in year 3 or year 4?
Right.
That's the problem.
The other thing worth noting here is that, to me, that conversation is a conversation for the offseason. And I understand.
Sure, because it depends on how you finish win-loss wise, though. You're 5-3. If they don't make the playoffs, then people are going to say you should have done it in the middle of the season. If you do make the playoffs, they're going to say let's do it in the offseason. But there's also the whole stat out there that because the Steelers fans have a Yankee mentality. It's not just about a championship, Alex. They got 3 playoff wins in the last 15 years. That is below a standard for the Steelers, but getting in the dance, and Tomlin will say, once you get in the dance, all new season, different circumstances. I mean, I can just give you what he's going to say. I mean, half of what you're saying sounds like it's coming out of Mike Tomlin's mouth.
He's not, the guy's not, the thing is he's not wrong.
That's we could have a whole, we're not going to do it here. We could have a whole nother show on the perception, the polarization of Mike Tomlin in general.
Yeah.
Which is, again, the never losing season, but it hasn't popped for a while. And I think he almost has the negative stain of having so much success early on that you never can get to that bar again. It's like Coach Alex. I mean, you're looking at careers. If you win one championship early in your career and you finish it, you have one championship. There are people that honestly believe that if you have that one championship total at the end, it's better than having it at the beginning. At the end of the day, it is 1. It is not 2.
Yeah.
It is not 3. It doesn't matter whether it's the beginning or at the end.
Think about how Penguins fans were probably treating Crosby and Malkin before they won those 2 back-to-back cups.
And they won but they won early in their career.
Because they had won that one early, and all we kept hearing from Penguins fans was,
you got to win more.
Oh man, like they haven't. It almost was like at that point that the one cup had been erased because they hadn't won in so long.
Because they had, and it really was only like a 3 or 4 year drought, and they were in the playoffs still. They're losing to teams that end up going to the final. But I mean, it's the whole thing of like, and I know Peyton Manning got pissed when he said this, but like Jim Irsay literally said that if you would have told me I'd have the greatest quarterback of all time and win only 1 championship, I would tell you there was a disappointment before having him. And I feel that way afterwards. And Peyton Manning was all pissed off about it and PO'd. But I could almost agree with Irsay in the fact that, and they went to 2, but like, if you have 4 MVPs and 2 Super Bowl appearances, that math doesn't work for me.
It also wasn't on Manning why they only had the 1.
I understand, but like, I mean, that like as an owner, if someone would tell you 20 years from now, you're going to have a guy who vies for greatest quarterback of all time, you would want to win more than 1 title.
And remember, the one that they did win was the defense was finally passable.
Yeah, it wasn't a great man.
Like it wasn't an elite defense. It was passable, and Bob Sanders had like the 100%. Greatest run for a safety in a playoff history, and it was passable.
But I mean, God came back to Manning though.
Yeah,
because I hate the debate when people say, well, Manning has 2 rings with 2 different franchises, like the only QB to do that and all that stuff. It's like the second one, he flat out sucked. Like it's not even like he got a charity ring.
Guy couldn't feel the football in his hand.
He literally, I don't know why.
Feel the ball.
I don't know why. I have his stat line memorized. In his second ring, the one with Denver, he threw 9 TDs and 17 interceptions.
Yeah, that's
legitimately not okay. I'm not even going to say bad. It was a borderline. Like we can swear here because this is just a YouTube channel. Yeah. He played like dog shit the whole season, and yet they won a Super Bowl. So it's considered this increase to his legacy. Oh, he has 2. If he would have had 1, I wouldn't.
I feel like he was gifted 1 back. For one that he should have gotten
you could argue that, but it's just funny
career.
that like there are people that would go on national shows and say, "Well, before I couldn't put him in the top 3, but because he won this one, now I can." It's like this season literally was not good.
Yeah,
but for him,
the Broncos had a championship caliber defense, and that's what did the job. So you asked me about Will Levis, and I do want to answer.
But
that
so where are you on Will Levis? Like, will Levis be somebody that we could have this debate for in the future? Because he is killing it right now. He even looked good in this loss. I don't think anybody really projected him to be the franchise guy for Tennessee, as we talked about with James. They drafted Malik Willis during the Pickett draft and thought he would maybe be the guy. Now it's Will Levis. I don't really love the personality of Will Levis, but like I like what I'm seeing on the field. Maybe that's just covering him at the combine. Nobody thought this would happen, and it is. And I guess I kind of like too, if you're doubted and you're doing it, and then you're throwing your middle fingers in the air, like that's kind of what he's doing. But I can't imagine he's going to keep this up, and we're going to see the Will Levis show for the next 10 years in Tennessee.
So I'm definitely not a big Will Levis evangelist, but what I will say is what I am is a big.
There's like none of them out there. So
yeah, I'm a big Ron Wolf evangelist, and Ron Wolf, former. This is before my time, so I'm just giving history here. I'm not. This is not because I was like a Jets fan. I wasn't alive I was alive, but I was a baby, so I wasn't aware of this. Ron Wolf was a major member of the New York Jets front office in the early 1990s, and he was the guy pushing the New York Jets to draft Brett Favre. And the big story in the 91 NFL draft when Favre got drafted, the New York Jets actually traded up to the 38th or 39th overall pick, and they did it without knowing whether or not Favre would be available. They just wanted to get up as high as they could, but they believed he would be there. As history goes, the Falcons took him 1 pick before. The New York Jets selected a young man.
And the Falcons didn't even want him. Their head coach at the time, like they really didn't. I mean, Favre talked about this. Like they never really even gave him a chance there.
Yeah. So the New York Jets select a young man named Browning Nagel. There's a reason why most people have never heard of him. It didn't work out for what a name, Browning Nagel.
He sounds like he should be currently running an Ivy League institution.
Sure. Yeah. Like President Dr. Browning Nagel. So it didn't work out for him in New York. It didn't work out for him in the NFL at all. But to that point, Ron Wolf later becomes the architect of the Green Bay Packers. And of course, was such a believer in Favre that he traded a first-round pick for Favre. You know what else Ron Wolf was a huge believer in? Drafting a quarterback every single year. And that's how you wind up with Matt Hasselbeck as Brett Favre's backup. That's how you wind up with, and I know he didn't draft Aaron Rodgers, but that was embedded into the Green Bay philosophy from a front office perspective. Yeah. And Tennessee has kind of followed that same path by going Willis and then going Levis. The reality is, unless you know you have a quarterback, you don't have a quarterback. So while I'm not ready to be a Will Levis,
it's almost, and we knew somebody who used to do this in college. It's almost like if you ask out 10 girls, you have better odds to get one of them to say yes. But if you ask out only one, or like if you ask out one or two, it's 50-50. If they both don't like you, you don't have a date tonight. But if you ask out 10, you only need one to say yes, and then you're going home with somebody. So, like, it almost is like that strategy sometimes some NFL teams do in the draft. Like, okay, we'll draft here, we'll draft here, we'll draft here, we'll draft here, we'll draft here. We got 6 QBs, we're stockpiling. We're going to figure out the 3 that are on the roster. One of them might end up being the guy. The other one will probably get pissed that he's a backup in a couple years, and then we'll trade him and get more draft picks, and we'll do this again. So, like,
it's true. I mean, again, it's a full that. So that to me makes a lot of sense. And I was listening.
It's harder in this day and age, though, because I will tell you, Alex, being in Pittsburgh media, I understand what you're saying, and there's already some colleagues of mine that have called to. There's some that have actually suggested they should go back for a quarterback again, even if it's later round, because Pickett hasn't truly proven he's the guy yet. But that doesn't mean you give up on Pickett. If you do that in this day and age versus the 90s, you got to be a really mentally sound man. And I think the pressure cooker of playing in the city that you played in college is really hard to deal with both ways, as we talked about. And because that'll be discussed every day. I mean, that 2-month period, and then it'll go on forever, especially going in the draft and after the draft of, are they done with Pickett? Every bad pass, it'll be, well, they got another first rounder right there. And you could argue that the Steelers kind of have put that together accidentally, Alex. You could argue this. Mason Rudolph's a 3rd-round pick. Say what you want about him. He's a 3rd-round pick. Mitch Trubisky's a former 1st-round pick that I believe the Bears ruined. Kenny Pickett's a 1st-round pick. So there's not many NFL teams that probably have a better top 3, and they may not have any of them be great, but like in terms, they got like 3 average QBs for 1, 2, or 3. A lot of other teams out there that if the first guy goes down, they have no one. No one.
Yeah. So I will say this, in my head, I'm thinking you're drafting, if Kenny Pickett's your guy, right? You're probably not drafting another guy in the 1st round unless somehow you
they're not going to do it.
Right.
They're not going to do
unless
it.
you've fallen ass backwards into like, oh, Caleb Williams fell unexpectedly and worked it. Like that would be one thing. I'm more thinking like you go get a 4th round or 5th round developmental guy.
Yeah, I still don't know if they'll do it though, but maybe.
Yeah. So that's and I'm just a big fan of that philosophy because in my opinion, it will only pay dividends because the truth is the protection for Pickett is, well, if they drafted this guy in the 5th round, if you drafted him in the 5th round, he's not ready to play. I get it. Brock Purdy is annihilating that narrative right now, but it's still.
He also won a lot of games thanks to the defense too.
Yeah,
a lot of Pickett wins. Sure. A lot of Pickett wins.
Purdy is probably a system quarterback, and I don't mean that as an insult. I really don't.
And there are already some. He's lost 3 in a row. There already are some Niner fans that are right now are just seeing it on social media, like, oh, maybe we were too high on him, like
freaking out about the whole Trey Lance trade. Now you got to relitigate,
right, because they lost 3 games in a row, and before it was just win after win after win with Brock Purdy. And honestly, too, Alex, I know they have a Hall of Famer there in John Lynch, so like you don't want to like usher him out the door, even though he didn't have his greatness with San Francisco. But any other executive in any league, if you have a 1st-round pick that you promote heavily is the guy, and then a couple years later you vocally say he's not, we're giving him up, and we're doing it for like late-round picks and a box of rocks, and we're just going to say we were wrong. Most owners would say, we agree, you were wrong, you're fired.
Yeah,
like, you can't just do that in any league. The reason why he is able to get away with it is because Brock Purdy was winning. So he was saying, yeah, I'm totally sucked, but this guy who we accidentally picked as Mr. Relevant is winning in spite of it. So everything else I did around the team is now being elevated, and we can go off of that. But now that they've been exposed a little bit and have lost several games in a row to average teams, and people are not remembering when they mopped the floor with the Steelers, for example, anymore. That now that conversation happens again. I mean, there maybe somehow Sam Darnold will get that shot, because if they lose another one, I could maybe see.
I love Sam Darnold, and I wish him the best. I hope that he's the next Geno Smith. I don't buy that he is going to have the same. I think Geno was much more messed up by the Jets than Darnold was. And
he physically got punched in the face.
Yes,
I mean, it was not a good situation. It was.
But I also do think the Jets. So, and I've been saying this, by the way, for a while. This is my company line. The Jets messed up on Darnold. Like they ruined. Let me rephrase that. The Jets may have ruined Sam Darnold.
Okay.
But I think Zach Wilson might have ruined the Jets. You know what I mean? Like they swung and missed on Zach Wilson.
I mean, it wouldn't.
That was a bad evaluation.
But a lot of NFL teams these days, as we talked about earlier, they're willing to admit error and then quickly give up draft picks and say, we'll just go bring in a Hall of Fame QB right now and we'll fix it all because we'll go on a championship run, even though we still sucked on Zach Wilson. You have to admit that it's probably the case that if Aaron Rodgers did not have, and we'll segue here as we end things, if he did not have the Achilles injury 4 plays into the season, based on the history of a veteran quarterback who's very smart, even if his talent has waned, we've seen this with Brady, obviously. We saw Favre at his best analytics season of his entire career with Minnesota after an average season with the Jets, but I could argue he didn't really want to be there. Joe Montana did it many, many years earlier. Peyton Manning obviously did it, and the team was so good. That could have easily been Aaron Rodgers. Who knows if they're going to win a title, but they would have at least been a playoff team. I'm sure he would have put up some numbers. It would have been okay. But yet, him getting hurt exposes everything else, because Aaron Rodgers has even literally said this, that they told me the plan was me as the guy for a year or 2 years, and we are asking you, Aaron, to please try to fix what we messed up on in Zach Wilson. And Aaron has said this publicly. Zach Wilson was not supposed to play. We didn't want him to play. He agreed. He didn't care about playing anymore for 1 or 2 years, and they wanted to start from scratch. Stop talking about people's mothers he's sleeping with and all of that, and let's just try to worry about football. And then all of that got thrown in the garbage because Aaron Rodgers got hurt. So if Aaron Rodgers didn't get hurt, this might be a different conversation we're having right now, because we wouldn't even be talking about Zach Wilson, because he'd be a backup. He wouldn't be playing. Like, you could argue that, yes, he screwed up the Jets the previous couple years, but he's now in a situation that was not putting him in a situation to succeed. That was not the plan. Mm-hmm. So it is kind of hard to harp on Zach Wilson sucking. Like, I don't think any Jets fan can say the sentence, Alex, and I'm sure some are saying it. At the end of this season, wherever it finishes, I don't think anybody can say, well, that season's on Zach Wilson. He ruined it. That would not be fair. He wasn't supposed to play. I think he does look. I guess I'll ask you this. I am watching Zach Wilson just for humor. I do watch some of Zach Wilson. It's just to see like what's going on. He looks better to me now than he was. There are some believe that even Aaron Rodgers being on the field physically helps him. It looks like there's a little bit more confidence. It looks like he's not going to make as many mistakes to kill you, even if he doesn't have the explosiveness. He's actually figured out that he's kind of athletic and mobile. He's like sneaky athletic a little bit, even though he's not.
The Jets have also figured that out
like
too.
Like a Geno Smith. I do actually think the Jets are calling plays more suited for Zach Wilson. I've actually seen Rex Ryan's been yelling about this on national TV, saying that you have to at least give him a chance by calling plays for him. It has to be a run-heavy offense. Last year, you weren't doing that. So he does. Rex Ryan's argument is that the Jets kind of screwed him up a little bit because they were not calling plays that were suited for what Zach Wilson can do. So I do believe Zach Wilson's got better. I don't think, obviously, he's going to lead you to a Super Bowl title here, but I think he's actually got better.
Yeah.
So do you believe Zach Wilson has actually got better? And what do you think has maybe led to him getting better, separate from the Rodgers talk? Because almost inadvertently, the Rodgers injury, even though it may not allow you to win a championship, it might save the career of Zach Wilson, whether it be in New York or not. Like, another team may see this and say, okay, we'll bring him on as our backup to compete in the summer when Aaron Rodgers is starting for the Jets next year. Whereas if this didn't happen, Zach Wilson probably sits 2 years in New York and then is done.
Yeah.
in the NFL as a joke.
I do think he's gotten better. There's a couple of notes here that are, I mean, I think it's, you look at the Kansas City game, right? And he was, I mean, honestly, probably
and the
best
schedule's
game.
been hard. Yes.
Yeah. Best game. He played his best game of his career against Kansas City. And to his credit, he's never played a game even like that. You know, there's no tier of game where you'd go like, oh yeah, like this is just like X game. No. It sits on a tier of its own. So to his credit, that right there shows that he has gotten better. And I do think Aaron Rodgers, they're buddies, man. They made it pretty clear. They are buddies. And I do think that influence has really helped Zach. One thing,
it's amazing what they could possibly have in common. Like, I mean, 20 years apart, and like,
I know.
I mean, I guess Aaron Rodgers is like the career bachelor as a 40-year-old man. So maybe Zach Wilson's like, this is what I can be. Aaron Rodgers is my god off the field. Yeah.
One thing of note here that I've kind of seen, and I was ready to forgive the Jets for this I was actually ready to forgive Zach Wilson for this last week. Okay. He did not play well in the game against the Giants, but what a lot of people don't realize, the Jets offensive line is already incredibly banged up at the moment, and that's where there's a lot of blame to go on Joe Douglas, because folks basically have said, hey, this guy hasn't, I mean, he's invested plenty in the O-line. The argument has been he's just kind of misinvested where it's gone. But the thing worth noting is they go in with multiple backups on the O-line. Elijah Vera Tucker is out for the season again, which is a brutal loss. And they go into that game in terrible rain, and not only do two backup offensive linemen go down, at one point they had Laken Tomlinson, who plays guard for them. At one point they were debating, I don't know if they actually wound up doing this, but at one point the debate was whether to shift him over to center, a position he has not played since high school, if I remember the commentary correctly. And so this is the type
maybe where the off season they messed up on. Obviously, you bring in Rodgers, it's a home run, but they did not focus in on that offensive line hardly at all.
They tried to buy in on, hey, Mekhi Becton,
and that's the theme of all of those veteran Hall of Fame quarterbacks that I mentioned. They went to it. You know what they did? From Montana to Brady to Favre to Peyton Manning, etc., even Matthew Stafford, they went to a new team. A lot of the time, similar offensive system. That's the secret thing. The reason, part of why the Favre didn't want to be with the Jets and wanted to be with Minnesota right away is because of Brad Childress, and he would be able to do. He had complete carte blanche.
That's a great pull by you, by the way, like Brad Childress. I haven't thought about that guy in a minute.
Right, but like Favre wanted to be in a situation that was identical to Green Bay. It was going to be the similar offense, similar system, and coaches who were basically felt like they had a man crush on him and he could do whatever he wanted. In the Jet situation, it wasn't like that. They were like, Favre, we love you,
fact,
but like,
wait, to that point with Rodgers, keep in mind that, so I said to you, I don't think Mike LaFleur should have been fired. If Rodgers wasn't a realistic goal for the Jets, I actually don't think LaFleur gets fired. I think he purely gets fired so that they can go hire
bring in the
stars completely aligned.
Right, so that's what everyone has done.
What you said. Yeah,
but the difference is, to all of those veteran QBs in a new place, they get similar offensive system. A lot of the time, they get the coach they want. All of that. I mean, Tampa Bay literally signed every single player that Brady won. He basically was the freaking GM, and obviously it worked out, but the point of it is, the other thing they all did is they made sure, okay, 40-year-old here, 40-year-old there, this guy's 40, this guy's 40. Yeah, the resume is good, but they're all 39, 40, and all these examples I mentioned. Our offensive line got to be freaking stellar. And they all had great offensive lines in those great years they had for the team and their individual numbers. Aaron Rodgers had the coach he wanted, had the system put in place that he wanted. He got to the team he wanted to be. He wanted to go to the Jets. Favre didn't want to go to New York. He wanted to go there. The offensive line was not close to what any of those other guys got O-line wise, and then he got hurt right away.
Yeah, and it is interesting because it's not like they didn't invest, right? So they spent big free agent money on Laken Tomlinson, who's been fine. They drafted Elijah Vera Tucker early, and in a small sample size, he's been phenomenal, but the guy cannot stay healthy. And Mekhi Becton is another example of a guy who had a phenomenal rookie year and hasn't been able to stay healthy since then. And personally, I think is completely miscast at left tackle anyway. I think he's a better right tackle. But so where did the pressure come from? Now, again, I will say one thing about Rodgers. I did think that he kind of fucked up that play. I do think that because he tried to,
because that's a whole another debate that's like died out.
Because I do think, because Rodgers, I know that he didn't like the play call, but because he did his Rodgers stuff where he's like, all right, I'm gonna do a little freestyling.
Why
here.
do you think though 4 plays in that was a whole debate all offseason is could he get his plays in or are they going to force some plays on him? Why would they force a play on him 4 plays in? This is freaking Aaron Rodgers. Like,
really
why bring him in and then try to have like an immature argument?
Well, it is weird too because it's like Nathaniel Hackett worked with Rodgers before, right? And theoretically should know Rodgers' tendencies. And I think this is just like an element of human nature where we don't think about the worst possible outcome.
Nobody thought that, right? Yeah.
Right. We only ever think like, well, if this play doesn't work, we'll just toss it from the playbook, right?
Or he'll be sacked, or he'll be sacked. Right. Not like you're going to end up tearing your Achilles and being out.
Right. Right. And so ultimately, and it is worth noting the pressure came from Dwayne Brown, who I think does look a little bit cooked. But so there's a lot of arguments to be made there. But like it's not like the Jets. If you looked at that offensive line from left guard to right tackle, I was feeling pretty good about it when you considered Vera Tucker and knowing that Joe Tippmann, who they spent a 2nd-round pick on in this most recent draft, was waiting in the wings to jump in at either a center or guard position. And now he's injured too, though he's going to be back, I think, in the next week or two. So it is just one of those things where like you have to ask yourself the question and you know, if you go back and look at the Niners as an example here, they do actually make a pretty interesting parallel here, especially when you consider how much the Jets and Niners have kind of exchanged coaches over the last few years. So many guys coming from that 49ers system, but just keep in mind that the 49ers had tremendous lack of luck during the early portion of Kyle Shanahan. And what the ownership chose to do was to say, hey, we see all the quarterback injuries. We know that the first 2 years were a rebuild anyway, but we see the Garoppolo injury. We see everything that's happening. So we're going to give you the time you need to fix this because we believe. And I will say for the Jets, they've had a similar level of really bad luck at a number of different positions. What I would pose, and this is
they definitely had some bad luck, 100%. Yeah.
This is the unanswerable question. And this is why I'm glad I don't own an NFL team other than, it'd be nice to be a billionaire, I'm sure. But I don't have to make this call. Have the things that occurred to the Jets, and right now they're 4-3, so you don't have to have this conversation right now because they've
it could have been worse. Yeah,
they've overachieved based on who their quarterback.
That's what I mean. I think nobody can blame this on Zach Wilson. He gave you more than anybody thought he would give. Already.
Right. And so the question is at this point, like if let's say the Jets go 7-10, right, or 8-9. I think if they go 9-8 with this quarterback all season, I think everybody keeps their jobs. But if they have another losing record again, of which they have done, 2023?
It's just funny if like Saleh gets fired here because all these coaches thought that Rodgers was going to make them all this money and they were going to ride up from the sunset. And you could argue that Saleh be the same coach now that he would have been with Rodgers, but having Rodgers, they would have probably got to be a playoff berth at minimum.
So do the Jets have to basically decide, do they have to say, hey, we're bringing everybody back? Because
I think it might be a mulligan. Maybe even the coaching staff,
we have to grade this season with a curve, just like the Niners had.
I think you do. And I honestly do believe, based on what we're seeing here from ownership sitting with him in the press box, wearing the flashy chain, and like you talk about buddies. Aaron Rodgers is buddies with Zach Wilson and the ownership and Woody Johnson. Like they are buddy. So I would not be shocked, Alex, if after this season's over, say the Jets just miss, or even if they get in the playoffs and lose right away, like it's almost a guarantee they're obviously not going to go to the Super Bowl here. So say this season ends in disappointment because you thought you were going to have Rodgers and you didn't get what you thought out of it, and you still believe in your defense. You're still relatively young. Like Sauce Gardner still got a decade left in him. And so is Wilson at the receiver spot. I wouldn't be shocked if ownership goes to Aaron Rodgers and says, how do you feel about the year? Just as an outsider, because you didn't play, do you want to run this back? And running it back might mean Saleh even stays. It might literally be a conversation of this year everybody was hired to have one plan. To no one's fault, we didn't get to do that plan. So we literally want to have the 2023 season in 2024 because we didn't get to do it. So we're just going to have this be like a mulligan, and then we'll do it next year. And then maybe if it doesn't start out strong next year, they fire Saleh mid-season. But I would not be shocked if they just run it back with almost the entirety of roster to coach to ball boy, like all again, because we didn't get it. the year we were supposed to have it, and Rodgers will be a
Yeah.
year older, but I would certainly imagine he's going to want to come back now and not end his career on the note that it ended on.
Yeah, I think he's going to, I mean, he certainly is, he wants to try. He's
And
made
that's
that
what I
really
was going to
clear.
ask you too. Do you have any belief that he's going to play this year? And if you're the Jets, because he's out there throwing, he's on his back foot, he's planting. We got doctors coming on shows saying that anyone with this injury shouldn't even be walking at all. And Rodgers is doing it, and we know Rodgers doesn't, believe in vaccines and modern things, and he's having a wizard help him.
Clearly, not getting vaccinated is why he's recovering.
I am sure he will argue that if he got vaccinated, he wouldn't be in this situation. And he also talked about on the McAfee show that he listened to dolphins have sex, and that also helped, calm him down. So he's very weird. He's obviously a great quarterback too. But the point of it is that while all of that is lunacy, we also are watching with our own two eyes a man that is planting on his foot that he tore his Achilles. Yeah. So it looks like sprinkled some fairy dust on him.
Yeah.
If, number one, do you believe he can really come back this year? And then if you're the Jets and everything he's saying is actually working, even though it sounds insane, and say you're sitting there, because like they're 4-3. Say they keep this win one, lose one, win one, lose one, and you're like 500 and it's week 13, and Rodgers says, and the doctors say he can play. It's not Rodgers MVP, but he can get out there. Do you do it, or do you say, Rodgers, this is just ludicrous? We'll go argue about vaccines later, but right now you need to shut it down, and we'll play next year.
Yeah, I mean,
he's going to want to play too. He's going to argue back with
you. Yeah, if you go back to when the injury first occurred, I think it was Adam Schefter who reported that technically the fastest noted recovery time of this injury ever was 20 weeks, which would have theoretically put him back in time for the Super Bowl. So if the Jets made the Super Bowl,
what do you do? They do like a playoff run with Aaron Rodgers.
Could you even imagine though? Like Zach Wilson leads you to the Super, like in this improbable scenario.
That is how you ruin. They're buddies now, but that's how I would lose the friendship if I did all that work. I mean, there were rumors though, Alex. I don't know. Did you hear that the 49ers, if they would have won the NFC title game over the Eagles, they literally were ready to sign Phillip Rivers? That is how they were not convinced on the QB situation. So, like, they were about to do what you're saying, and they have admitted this. Shanahan's admitted this. They were going to sign him to play one game. Now, number one, would you have counted this as a championship and a ring for him? And number two, like, because he hadn't had one yet. And number two, obviously Phillip Rivers is better than Purdy if we're talking career to career, but like that's risky to do. I mean, the guy hadn't been there all year. Rodgers has been hurt all year. He's not working with the team. The guy leads you that far.
Purdy got hurt in that NFC title game.
He did get hurt. I believe they went down even in the third string quarterback. But I think from what Shanahan has said and what the reports are, regardless of anything, they were ready to sign Rivers.
That's wild, man. That's so crazy.
I honestly wanted to. Do you not want to see? I really wish they would have won that fucking game. Now
it's such a great.
I would have loved, and the fact that Rivers was down, like the fact that he was ready to go.
Well, of course, it's the one thing the guy never accomplished. He never even played in the damn game.
No, I would have in the year that he went to a conference title game during 2007 when the Patriots had an undefeated season. Like he had no chance there. If there was ever a guy, forget whether we're counting it or not, like he's not in the GOAT debate. I would have loved to see him miss a whole year, sit out, be retired, and then play in the Super Bowl. And if he would have won it, that would have been a movie. They would have made a movie about that damn thing. I would have been all about that. But like, the difference here is though, if you tell Rodgers we just want to sit out this year because we believe in medical science. Unfortunately, I know you don't. Rodgers is going to argue with you. Like, can you sell him on not playing if he wants to play in the divisional round?
I do think that it's. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is me. I think.
Or do you think they're gonna do? Being a Jets fan, like
I think Rodgers is a smart enough guy to know that if a doctor tells him he's in serious danger, he's not going to do it because
doctors tell him not to play on the foot, and he is doing it. He is doing it. They are saying do not play on the foot, and Rodgers says, I don't care. I'm going to play on the foot. We're going to have a video before the game, and then it's going to be on McAfee on Tuesday. Like, that is that is his plan. He is doing it now.
I mean, I guess there is a difference, though, between doing it, once.
Sure, but
and
I guess
doing it 35
knowing the
times.
Jets, though, do you think they would do this? Like, if Rodgers is even in an argument with a doctor, that if they get one doctor to say we could do this,
I think he'd have to be cleared by the team doctor. I really don't.
and if he's cleared by the team doctor, you think they would throw him out there?
I guess it would really depend, but I like the scenario we're also talking about is Zach Wilson leads this team to the playoffs, and I just don't believe that is ever going to occur.
What if it's like the last? Yeah, I mean, I even might even be contention though. Like, what if they're?
Oh man,
what if they're like a game out because? I don't know. I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers like even tried to allude to the Christmas Eve game or something.
And that's insane to me. Like that's completely. But you know what? Listen, it's useless to speculate, but it's fucking hilarious.
It really is. It really is.
It's very funny to. So like, listen, I'm going to enjoy the fact that the Jets are 4-3, and I'm going to say this: they didn't play their best football in the last game, and they didn't play their best football against a shitty team. But you know what? The weather was garbage, and they won a game in a way that typically they are famous for losing games exactly the way they won that one. So I'm going to enjoy it, and I think Steeler fans, I'm going to bring this all home in a nice, tidy fashion because I got to go to bed. But Steeler
100%.
fans should think about this in the macro. You haven't played very well on one side of the football. That's not the worst thing in the world because that means there's still meat on the bone.
And you can get better while winning. I mean, that's a luxury in the NFL to be able to get better while winning. And I think we also can bring it home to the fact that if the Steelers and Jets were like one roster of 100+ guys and they could flip-flop Pickett and Wilson and have the combination of the Jets and Steelers, if you could have like Sauce Gardner and TJ Watt and then maybe have Wilson and George Pickens, that could be a Super Bowl champion.
Well, sure.
Like that might be good enough to have Pickett and Zach Wilson lead the ship. That might be enough. You might not need Big Ben and Aaron Rodgers then, but it just would be. I mean, I just will say, can you imagine? I will, because this will get in your cry. It almost is like you're rooting for the Jets. You have this conundrum too. I guess we'll leave with this, Alex. You are rooting for the Jets. Obviously, they're better off with Aaron Rodgers, even 80% of him. But you know in your heart of hearts that if Aaron Rodgers comes out there Christmas Eve or even in the playoffs and he ends up leading them on a run and he plays really, really well, he's going to then feel like that legitimizes his entire argument against medical science. So like you'll have nothing to say back. You'll be like, yes, Aaron, you are like Jesus. That apparently nothing applies to you.
I'm not worried about it happening, but one note, the nicest thing Aaron did for the New York Jets was get hurt in week 1. Okay. Because now the Jets don't have to spend a first-round pick on him, and they'll still get him next season.
Well, that is true.
Right. So listen, in a weird way, listen, if you okay, here's where I'm really going to leave you guys. If you want to be a really crazy conspiracy theorist, and this would have applied more likely if the Jets had done this in like week 7, but it happened in week 1. He's not actually hurt. Motherfucker's not actually hurt. That's how he's able to plant. He's not actually hurt. The Jets just didn't want to spend a first-round pick, so they got out of the condition.
And he didn't really want to play before the season. He was putting with retirement, so he was like, "I'll take a year off.
Right.
Give me $40 million to not play. I'm going to go take another $1 million from McAfee. We'll talk to him." And
that's the real conspiracy.
And he really was only brought in to be. Maybe he'll never play for the Jets. How about this conspiracy? Maybe he's never going to play with the Jets, and he was only brought in to be a mentor to Zach Wilson, who then eventually becomes the guy. Maybe they're paying for him just to help Zach Wilson because like the vibes of Aaron Rodgers.
I like how the Steelers' instant reaction has turned into New York Jets conspiracy.
I knew it was going to, but nonetheless, but this
well done.
This was fun. I will talk to you on Tuesday on your show with another team that has been winning despite not playing really well that much.
Sure.
and I don't know if you saw, by the way, for a tease that I didn't get to bring up with you because it is new news, but Keaton Slovis not going to play.
I saw it really, really late. Yeah. Apparently I'll be very interested.
It takes the fun away a little bit for me, honestly.
I agree. It does feel.
That's a little bit like.
Yeah. You know, have you ever seen Parks and Rec, Mike?
Yes, I have.
Okay, you know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of when Ben goes back to his hometown and they want to fuck with him because they all still hate him, and then he gets a kidney stone or whatever it is and goes into the hospital, and they're like motherfucker, like this guy, like we were gonna give him a hard time, and now he's. So that's exactly what. And now that you know, I don't like that comparison though because it makes Keaton Slovis actually cool in that scenario because you know Ben is awesome and Keaton Slovis is not.
He's not. So. No, he's not cool. But I mean. I've actually seen a lot of West Virginia fans that are actually scared now because they think the team like got up for Keaton Slovis and now they're going to get down because they have a JUCO QB who potentially actually is a gunslinger. So, well, the secondary might be more tested now.
Yeah.
But that'll do it for this Ask 9 hour and 20 minutes that we put together here. So, talk to you soon, man.
Yeah. See you, man. Have a good.
All right. Yep. That was my trek through the wilderness there, my attempt at, and I was inspired by Shannon Sharp and Chad Ochocinco, by the way, for Nightcap. So it kind of starts off with analysis, then gets really funky and asinine. I'm going to bring on some colleagues. I'm going to bring on some friends. I'm going to bring on some former players. I'm going to bring on some people that maybe cover things that aren't sports. We're going to talk about it all. I'm going to do this after some big games, maybe just in general. But at the end of the day, I'm going to do more lives on this channel because when I do lives, people do watch them. When I just dump professional stuff, it's hit or miss. So I'm going to try to beef this up. Doesn't take away from my career at all. This isn't tied to anything, as we know, and as we saw, and as you listened to. And, we were swearing. We were going off on a tangent more so than normal. It didn't really fit like a blueprint there. It wasn't scripted, but hey, you go from the Steelers to the Jets. I figured maybe with Alex we would get there, but it didn't make sense. It wasn't a Steeler post-game show. It was just friends hanging out and was a live instant reaction show off a big game. So, yeah, kind of like a nightcap that Shannon Sharp and Chad Ochocinco do. And, they get into it as well. So we kind of brought that flavor. We brought that vigor to you also. But as Alex put it, I now also will go to bed since this now ends at around 1 or so in the morning. And I now wish I was going to go to bed with some Sarah's chocolate covered pretzels that JJ Watt was able to enjoy at the Steeler game. So I'm jealous of that, but subscribe, bottom of the video, hit that button. You'll get notifications whenever any of these lives happen or really anything is uploaded on this channel. And of course, find me on social media. It is right next to the name. They're also in the graphic. I'll go this way. Yep. Down there. And then there it is again. I'll go that way at Mike Asti 11. So that'll be it. And the polarizing conversation of Kenny Pickett, of George Pickens, of Najee Harris, of the Pittsburgh Steelers, of Mike Tomlin, of the Jets, of Aaron Rodgers, of everything under the sun, all going to continue on. We'll talk about it again. It'll be talked about it again. It'll be talked about again. But that's why this is fun.